Captain Peter Cutsie, South Korea, and this is my briefing room. Today, part 3 in the FMC failure. Remember, in part 2, we flew the aircraft off of runway 08 left at Muscat. We aviated, we navigated towards the MCT VOR and set up a hold. Inbound 280 right-hand pattern on the 100 radial at 6,000 feet. And we communicated. And then at that particular point, we should get into the checklist, which we didn't do because of the length of the video in part 2. So we're going to get right into the checklist for FMC failure. And remember, again, the situation was that we lost both the captains and the first officers FMC, as indicated by the 2 following slides that I've just shown you. So we get right into the QRH for this. I have done this for your PowerPoint presentation. These are pictures, and there's a reminder, as I mentioned before, but let's go right to the PDF file, which is a higher resolution and better to view. So FMC FAIL, display of VTK followed by map failure flags. The map failure approximately 10 to 15 seconds after on one or both of the navigation displays. In this case, it's on both navigation displays. The objective is to restore dual FMC operation and configure for a single FMC operation or resume conventional navigation. So in our particular case, we're going to be resuming conventional navigation, which we have done up to this point as we established ourselves in the holding pattern over Muscat. So check both navigation display map modes and FMC CDUs. We have. Choose one. No FMC data on the captain's and the first officer's navigation display map modes, and no FMC data on both CDUs. We identified that. The indication, both FMCs are failed. Go to step 7, which we will do. Resume conventional navigation. Well, we're doing that. We're in the hold, and we're using the autopilot, and we're using the auto throttles. And we're holding inbound on a track of 280 degrees, and 280 is set in both course windows on the MCP. And remember, once we're over the holding pattern, over the MCT VOR, heading select, and then turn to the outbound heading the way I briefed you on in part 2. So verify the relative to terrain using conventional navigation. Verify position relative to terrain. Now, eGPWS may use inaccurate GPS position data or an inappropriate value of RMP. This could result in a vertical speed terrain display in that incorrectly positioned relative to the airplane track. So do not use the VSD. Let's just go back to the PowerPoint presentation for a moment, and let me show you a little slide just to remind you that your VSD, if you have it, don't use it. If you have it on your airplane, don't use it. All right, let's go back to the checklist here. So that is important. Now, you know your position because you're over the VOR. All right. So when preparing for an approach, which is going to come up soon, you're going to have to prepare for the approach. Remember, the sequence is we aviated, we navigated, we got into the holding pattern, now the first non-normal checklist. kind of think that discipline as we covered in the engine out operations and all the engine malfunctions and all those briefings that you've probably viewed already. Think of the standard way of handling your disciplines in aviating, in navigating, and you're returning to the departure airport once you've navigated and got yourself established in the hole. You would do a quick DODAR, DODAR. You diagnose what the problem was. Yes, we have diagnosed the problem. You have options. Yes, we either continue en route or we're going to stay. Our options today is that we can't go en route in an RNAV environment, so we're staying over Muscat using conventional navigation. And that's what your decision is in the DODAR, D-O-D. And your actions, you're taking your actions now, you're doing the checklist, and then you're going to prepare for an approach and landing here at Muscat and a review. So you've done that when you enter the holding pattern, you've got into the checklist, and that's where we are now. And we're at number 9, use the N1 speed ref set page to set the current gross weight. Use the N1 speed ref set page to set the reference speed. And use the N1 speed reference set page to set the N1 bugs. All right, we're going to do that. And what I have done is we have brought up a few pages here that you should be well aware of and know where they are. You're going to get your speeds from the QRH. And right next to it in your paper copy is the go around EPR. So this is where you get your speeds. I've just got an example of one here for a flaps 40 VREF close to your max landing weight is 141. So 141 is your VREF, and you're going to be flying at VREF 40 plus 70. So that's where you get that magic speed of 210 knots that we talked about in part 2. 141 plus 70 is 211. So 210 knots at a weight close to max landing weight is a good reference and also a good holding speed. So that's where you're going to get that reference. On the other page, close to the same page in the hard copy, is the go around EPR old airplane go around N1 reference, and Boeing very carefully put them together for that reason, I'm sure. So here they're go around N1 reference, let's say close to sea level temperature, which is 15. So let's say 17. And if you're at sea level, and you are at Muscat, very close to sea level, so 98.3 would be your N1 reference. So you've got your speed reference, you've got your N1 reference already. Let's go back to the PowerPoint and have a look at some of these, what they actually look like on the panels. Here is the panel that we're talking about. And the N1 set, I've broken it down into 2 pictures just so it's not confusing, but the N1 set here, it's in the auto mode, and you would set the captains on number 1 and the first officers on number 2. All right, the speed ref set is here for V1, VR, and your weights and VREF. So that's what we're going to be referring to when we get into how to set them. How to set them is actually outlined in the setting N1 bugs with no operative FMC manual N1 bug setting. And we also have the manual speed setting. This comes out of the supplementary procedures in your FCOM 1 supplementary procedures. So here they are here. Selector refers to either captain's or first officer's knob. Selector outer knob to select captain or number 1. And MFD information switch push, then the N1 speed ref set display is shown. So the selector inner knob rotate to both and push. The last FMC computed value is shown by reference N1 bugs. If the FMC has not calculated an input since power up, a default value of 104 is shown. So in any case, your instructor will show you that in the simulator, and you're actually going to touch it. You'll probably, I would freeze the simulator in this particular case. This is once when the instructor should freeze and actually show you. It's very simple, and all you have to do is just do it once, and it's easy to remember. In any case, if you're not sure how to do it, you want to know where to go. Don't memorize this procedure, although it's very simple. You want to know where to go, and that's why I've just shown it to you here. So that's important, and that's where you're going to be setting this information. So let's go back to the checklist. So you use the N1 speed to set the gross weight. We showed you that. The N1 speed, we showed you that. And the N1 speed ref. So N1 speed ref set, and to set the N1 and for the speed. For additional information on this, refer to, we just did, supplementary procedures, page 7. And also, as far as the speed is concerned, it's also in the supplementary procedures. All right, so let's go back to our main menu in our PowerPoint. So now that you have actually set up your references, you can, and your checklist is complete, you're now going to prepare yourself for what comes next. Now, you entered the holding pattern, you did that little dodar to make sure that you've got everything covered. You did the first non-normal checklist. Now is the time to do the after takeoff checklist. You did the procedure when the flaps were up and the lights were out. You remember that back in part 1. Now you are going to do the after takeoff checklist. Then, after you've done that, you've got to set the aircraft up for the approach. And we don't have an FMC to set up, but at least we're going to talk about how we're going to do this by ensuring that we're going to set the courses on the MCT must be set to the same courses at all times. Likewise, when you come inbound to the localizer, you're going to use the setting that we showed you before as far as the panel references. Now remember, when you're using, when you're using VOR, when you're outbound on the 280 radio, you're going to have VOR selected, either in the expanded mode or in the center VOR mode. But once you're at the 12 nautical mile point, and we'll have a look at that chart later, you're going to have to revert to the approach mode once you're on, say, a 45-degree intercept. And of course, you're using a heading mode for that because you don't have LNAV. At this particular point, you're down at 3,400 feet, and we'll have a look at the chart shortly. So you're going to change the MCP courses to 084 and make sure that you are in the approach mode and getting this picture presentation in the expanded or in the center, center approach mode. So these are the things that you're going to have to brief on, and brief on carefully, because it's important that you know what you're going to do before you get into it. So here's the actual approach plate that we had a look at before. And remember, we're going to go outbound on the 280 radial, and that's why you selected the 280 inbound as a course to hold on. That's a suggestion. There is a hold published, as you can see here, with inbound of 264 to the VOR, but I'm sure the airport authorities would allow you to hold on the 100 radio because you are still protected. That is a suggestion. If they did not allow or approve holding on the 100 radio, then hold on the 084 radio. But to make it simple, I'm making this presentation so that whatever you're holding on, you're going to go outbound on the same track. All right. So you're going to brief about how you're going to do that. And you're going to brief that you're both going to set 280 degrees on the courses as you go to VOR outbound. You're going to be configured in a flap 5 configuration for this in order to achieve a maximum speed of 180 knots and probably close to about 160 knots, thereabouts in the flap 5 mode. That's a good flap setting to use. You're going to be at 6,000 feet over the VOR, and if you notice, you're going to go upbound to 12 DME. Well, you've got all that information on your nav display. Remember, I showed you that before. All that great information. You don't have a map. The map is here, but you've got the DME. So you're going to go to 12 DME. You're using the autopilot, and you're using vertical speed. A good suggestion. And you're going to lose from 6,000 feet to 3,400 feet. You've got 12 miles to do it. You've got a vertical speed arc. Use all the data that you've got so that you can actually have a constant descent path. You've got the auto throttles engaged. You've got the autopilot engaged. You're in VOR lock. So when you went by the MCT VOR on the heading mode, and give the radio a chance to align itself, then select VOR lock. Make sure you have a capture on your nav display and allow the autopilot to track the radio. Remember, you can always check all this data with that solid white line. That solid white line is your track, your magnetic track. And it should actually overlap what you're actually looking at on your nav display. If you went back to your nav display, you would see that track. And that's all from the IRS, remember. So use vertical speed until you get to 12 nautical miles. At 12 nautical miles, you're going to have to go to the heading select mode and start a left turn. You're going to start a left turn to intersect the 264 or the inbound course of 084. So when you actually start your turn, the pilot flying is going to ask the pilot monitoring to tune the VOR frequency 1089 and identify it. And you can identify it on the nav display. And also to set the courses to 084, the captain's course and the first officer's course to 084. The pilot monitoring is going to do that on the direction of the pilot flying. The pilot flying is focusing on looking at the DME and not going beyond, let's say, 15 DME. You're in a turn, you want a reasonable rate of turn. You don't have LNAV, but if you're going to use 20 degrees of bank, depending on the wind, that's a good starter to use, somewhere between 15 and 20. And why? It's all mathematics, and I'll explain that someday, but you don't want to get involved in that. Just fly the airplane and look at the DME as you're flying the airplane, and then roll out on a heading 45 degrees off of 084, and then go ahead and arm, providing the pilot monitoring has set 084, has tuned the frequency to 1089, has set 084, then you can actually arm VOR lock again. Now, VOR lock means either VOR or localizer. Well, in this case, it's localizer. And you'll have it indicated as armed, and then when you capture it, you'll actually capture it and you follow it on the raw data. Meanwhile, you're at 3,400 feet, and as you approach the 6.7 IML, which is 6.5 from touchdown, somewhere 2 nautical miles before that, you can start to configure for landing. 2 nautical miles is a good figure, and we'll talk about that when we talk about how to do a non-precision approach in one of my other videos. All right, so 2 nautical miles before, gear down, flaps 15, and speed brakes arm. And make sure that you are configured and established on the localizer. And then as you approach 6.7 DME, gear down and landing flaps 30, and then landing check. Now remember, before you started the approach, let's go a few steps back. You talked about it, you briefed on it, but then you actually had to do a descent a checklist, a descent procedure, I should say, and a descent checklist, an approach procedure, an approach checklist from your normal checklists. So once you've completed the setup, and the setup is not the FMC setup, it's the briefing. The FMC is here. So you've given the briefing, you've done the descent procedure, and then the descent checklist, the approach procedure and the approach checklist have been completed. Then you set heading out of the holding pattern the way we briefed and started descent using vertical speed to 3,400 feet to 12 nautical miles. There's got to be a great coordination between pilot monitoring and pilot flying. Remember, pilot flying, you focus on flying the airplane. You're using the auto flight systems. You're using the auto throttles. So fly the airplane and try to do it in the fashion that I just briefed you on. And you'll find that this procedure works out absolutely beautifully. And remember that you've selected approach on the so that the proper picture of the expanded mode for the approach mode or the center mode, and the auto flight systems will handle the aircraft. You're going to do all the thinking. This will complete this portion of the part 3. We're going to talk about going around in part 4. I'm going to dedicate part 4 to just the go around procedure and the coordination that you've got to brief yourself on. Okay, I hope you enjoyed part 3. Tune in for part 4, which will be the go around procedure that you would have briefed on in that holding pattern. Remember, that's important. Thanks for watching.